Let's start with a story about a man who grew up in one of the toughest neighborhoods in Chicago. Imagine being surrounded by challenges, financial struggles, limited opportunities, and people constantly doubting your potential. But this wasn't just any kid. He had something special inside him. A spark. A hunger to rise above everything life threw at him. He didn't come from money or privilege. His parents worked tirelessly, his dad as a mechanic and his mom cleaning offices late into the night. They might not have had much, but they gave him two things no one could ever take away: love and values. From an early age, they taught him that hard work pays off, education opens doors, and respect is earned through actions, not words. These lessons became the foundation of everything he did later in life. School wasn't easy for him either. He was often teased because of where he came from and how he dressed. Hand-me-down clothes and second-hand books were all his family could afford. But instead of letting those taunts bring him down, he used them as motivation. "If they think I'm nothing," he would tell himself, "I'll show them exactly what I can do." His grades reflected his determination. Teachers noticed his brilliance, recommending him for advanced classes despite the odds stacked against him. Scholarships started rolling in during high school, opening pathways he never thought possible. One scholarship led to another, until, finally, he landed in one of the best universities in the country. But even there, he faced obstacles. People whispered behind his back, questioning whether he truly belonged among students from wealthy families. Some professors underestimated him, assuming he wouldn't keep up with the rigorous coursework. Yet semester after semester, he proved them wrong. Not only did he graduate at the top of his class, but he also earned awards that caught the attention of big companies. After college, he climbed the corporate ladder faster than anyone expected. Starting as an entry-level employee, he quickly made a name for himself with innovative ideas and relentless dedication. Colleagues admired his ability to solve problems others deemed impossible. Bosses promoted him again and again, recognizing his leadership skills and unmatched work ethic. Despite his growing success, he never forgot where he came from. Every time someone doubted him because of the color of his skin, he reminded himself of the little boy in Chicago who refused to give up. Those moments fueled him, pushing him to break barriers and shatter stereotypes. By the time he turned 38, he decided it was time to create something of his own. With years of experience under his belt, he founded a tech company focused on cloud computing solutions, a field that was still relatively new at the time. The idea was simple yet revolutionary: make technology accessible, efficient, and affordable for businesses of all sizes. And guess what? It worked. His company skyrocketed in popularity, attracting clients worldwide and earning billions in revenue. Within a decade, it became one of the most valuable tech firms in the industry. Suddenly, he wasn't just a successful businessman, he was a billionaire. And not just any billionaire, one of the few black billionaires in the world. But here's the thing about success: it doesn't shield you from prejudice. In fact, sometimes it amplifies it. As his wealth and influence grew, so did the whispers. Competitors tried to discredit him, claiming his achievements were luck rather than skill. Some colleagues dismissed his ideas simply because of who he was. Even in meetings filled with suits and ties, he often felt like an outsider looking in. Still, he carried himself with grace and dignity. He knew the weight of his position. It wasn't just about him anymore. He represented hope for countless young dreamers who looked like him. So whenever someone underestimated him, he smiled politely and let his results speak for themselves. Then came the day that changed everything. An invitation arrived from a major European conglomerate, a $5.5 billion partnership deal. This was more than just business. It was a chance to take his company global. For weeks, he prepared meticulously, ensuring every detail was perfect. Little did he know, this meeting would test not just his professional skills but also his character. As he boarded the plane to Europe, he felt a mix of excitement and nerves. What awaited him on the other side? Would this be the opportunity of a lifetime, or something entirely unexpected? The day of the big meeting arrived, and the air buzzed with anticipation. The European conglomerate's headquarters stood tall, a sleek glass building that screamed power and prestige. Inside, the conference room was a picture of luxury: polished, wooden tables, high-backed leather chairs, and a wall-to-wall screen ready to display presentations. It was the kind of place where deals worth billions were made or broken. He walked in dressed sharply, his confidence radiating through every step. His suit fit perfectly, his shoes gleamed, and his tie was knotted just right. He carried himself like someone who belonged there, even though he knew some people in the room might not see it that way. As he entered, the executives from the other side stood up to greet him. Handshakes were exchanged, polite smiles flashed, and small talk filled the air. Everything seemed normal, professional even. The meeting began smoothly. Both sides presented their ideas, discussing how this partnership could change the game for both companies. Charts, graphs, and projections lit up the screen as teams on either side explained their strategies. For the most part, it felt like any other business negotiation. But beneath the surface, something else was brewing. As the morning stretched into the afternoon, they broke for lunch. Catered meals were brought in and the mood lightened slightly. Conversations turned casual with laughter and jokes breaking. The tension. That's when it happened, the moment that would define the rest of the day. When the bill arrived, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his black card. Not just any credit card, it was the black card, the kind reserved for individuals who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. To him, it wasn't about showing off. It was simply convenient. The card offered perks that made travel and expenses easier to manage. Plus, it was a symbol of how far he'd come, a reminder of the hard work and sacrifices that got him to this point. But not everyone saw it that way. Across the table, a few junior employees exchanged glances. One of them smirked, leaning over to whisper something to the person next time. Another chuckled softly, trying to mask it as a cough. Then came the comment, loud enough for him to hear but quiet enough to pretend otherwise. "Oh, look at this," one of them muttered under their breath. "Mr. Big Shot thinks flashing his black card will impress us." Another voice joined, and barely containing their snicker. "Guess he doesn't realize we don't need gimmicks around here." The words hit like a punch to the gut. He froze for a split second, his hand hovering midair as he processed what he'd just heard. Part of him wanted to laugh it off, to brush it aside like so many similar comments he'd endured before. But another part of him burned with anger. Not just at the insult itself, but at the audacity of these people to say such things in a professional setting. For a brief moment, he considered calling them out. He imagined turning to them, looking them straight in the eye and asking why they thought it was okay to mock him. But then he stopped himself. No, he decided. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. Instead, he calmly handed the card to the waiter, thanked him, and continued the conversation as if nothing had happened. On the outside, he appeared composed. Inside, though, his mind raced. Who did these people think they were? Did they really believe their petty remarks would shake him, or worse, did they think he wouldn't notice? He replayed the incident in his head, analyzing every tone, every glance, every smirk. It wasn't just about the card, it was about what it represented. They weren't mocking a piece of plastic. They were mocking him, mocking his success, his journey, his very identity. Despite the weight of the moment, he didn't let it show. He finished the meal, participated in the discussions, and maintained his professionalism throughout the rest of the meeting. When the session ended, he shook hands with the senior executives, thanking them for their time. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but deep down he knew this encounter wasn't over, not by a long shot. As he left the building and climbed into the car waiting outside, he exhaled deeply. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror, sensing the tension in the air. "Everything all right, sir?" he asked cautiously. He nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Yeah, everything's fine," he replied. But inside he was anything but fine. The wheels in his mind were already turning, piecing together what had just happened and what it meant. For him, for his company, and for the future of this deal. Little did those junior staffers know, Their careless words had set off a chain reaction. What started as a harmless jab during a business lunch would soon spiral into something much bigger, something that would leave an entire corporation reeling and make headlines around the world. And all because of one man's decision to stand up for himself in the face of disrespect. The car ride back to the hotel was quiet, but his mind was anything but. As the city streets blurred past the window, he replayed the lunchtime incident over and over again. Those whispered comments about the black card, they weren't just harmless jokes. They were deliberate jabs, thinly veiled insults that cut deeper than any of those junior staffers probably realized. And now, sitting alone in the back seat of the car, he had time to really think about what it all meant. At first, he tried to convince himself it wasn't a big deal. People said stupid things sometimes, didn't they? Maybe these employees didn't mean anything by it. Maybe it was just their way of trying to seem clever or funny in front of their bosses. But the more he thought about it, the angrier he got. These weren't teenagers messing around in school. These were adults working for a multi-billion-dollar company. Adults who should have known better. Adults who represented the very organization he was considering partnering with. He leaned back against the leather seat, staring out at the passing buildings as his driver navigated through traffic. He knew this wasn't the first time someone had made a comment like that to him. Over the years, he'd heard plenty of similar remarks, some subtle, some not so much. Each one stung, but he always brushed them off. Why waste energy on ignorance? He had bigger things to focus on, like growing his company and proving himself in an industry dominated by people who didn't look like him. But this felt different. This wasn't just some random stranger making a rude remark on the street. This was happening in a professional setting, a meeting between two major companies discussing a deal worth billions. If low-level employees felt comfortable enough to mock him openly, what did that say about the culture of the company itself? What kind of environment allowed such behavior to thrive? By the time the car pulled up to the hotel, his anger had shifted into something else. Determination. He stepped out of the vehicle, thanked the driver, and headed inside. The lobby was bustling with guests checking in and out, but he barely noticed. His thoughts were consumed by one question. What should he do next? Back in his suite, he poured himself a glass of water and sat down at the small desk near the window. The view overlooked the city skyline, but he wasn't looking at it. Instead, he opened his laptop and pulled up the documents related to the deal. Numbers, projections, timelines, all the details of the partnership stared back at him. On paper, everything looked perfect. This deal could take his company global, open doors he'd been dreaming about for years, and solidify his place among the top players in the tech world. But now there was a problem, a big one. How could he align himself with a company that tolerated, or worse, encouraged, this kind of behavior? Was the financial gain worth compromising his values? Could he really trust these people to honor the terms of the agreement, when their own staff couldn't even show basic respect? For hours he wrestled with the decision. He paced the room, scribbled notes on a pad of paper, and stared at the ceiling, trying to weigh the pros and cons. At one point, he picked up his phone and scrolled through messages from friends and colleagues congratulating him on landing such a massive deal. "This is huge," one text read. "You deserve this," another said. Reading those words made him feel even more conflicted. Yes, he deserved success, but not at the cost of his dignity. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he came to a conclusion. There was no way he could move forward with the deal, not after what had happened. It wasn't just about the insult itself. It was about what it represented. Tolerating racism, even in its subtlest forms, sent a message that it was okay. And if there was one thing he refused to do, it was send that message. With his decision made, he took a deep breath and picked up his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for, the CEO of the European conglomerate. His finger hovered over the call button for a moment before he pressed it. The line rang twice before the other man answered. "Hello?" the voice on the other end said, sounding surprised to hear from him. "Hi," he replied, keeping his tone calm and steady. I wanted to personally thank you for today's discussions. Your team has done impressive work. There was a pause, followed by a warm response. Thank you. We're excited about the potential partnership. I believe this could be transformative for both our companies. Another pause. Then, carefully choosing his words, he said, Unfortunately, I've decided not to move forward with the deal. Effective immediately, my company is withdrawing from negotiations. The silence on the other end was deafening. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then the CEO finally broke it. Wait, what? May I ask why? He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. During today's meeting, certain members of your staff made derogatory remarks about me using my black card. While I understand no workplace is immune to poor behavior, I cannot align myself or my company with an organization that tolerates such attitudes. Before the CEO could respond, he added firmly, I trust you'll handle this matter internally. Goodbye. And with that, he ended the call. As he set the phone down on the table, a wave of relief washed over him. It wasn't an easy decision. Walking away from $5.5 billion never is, but it was the right one. He knew he might face criticism for letting emotions get in the way of business, but he also knew that standing up for himself was non-negotiable. He stood up and walked over to the window, gazing out at the city lights twinkling below. Somewhere out there, people were already talking about what had just happened. News traveled fast in the corporate world, especially when billions of dollars were involved. By tomorrow morning, headlines would be buzzing, reporters would be scrambling for details, and the fallout would begin. But none of that mattered right now. All that mattered was that he had stayed true to himself. As he stood there, watching the city pulse with life, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in a long time. Money could buy a lot of things, but it couldn't buy integrity. And integrity, he reminded himself, was priceless. The moment the phone call ended, a strange calm settled over him. He placed the phone gently on the table and took a step back, exhaling deeply, as if he'd just released a weight he'd been carrying for far too long. But he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. What happened next would ripple far beyond that hotel room, reaching boardrooms, news outlets, and social media feeds around the world. Within minutes of hanging up, his phone started buzzing incessantly. Notifications poured in, texts, emails, missed calls, all from people who had somehow caught wind of what had transpired. Word traveled fast in the corporate world, especially when billions were involved. Reporters began reaching out, asking for statements. Industry insiders speculated about why such a massive deal had fallen apart so suddenly. And then, inevitably, the whispers turned into headlines. By morning, the story was everywhere. $5.5 billion deal canceled after alleged racist remarks, one major news site declared. Another read, Black CEO walks away from partnership over discrimination claims. The internet exploded with reactions. Some praised his bold move, calling it a powerful stand against prejudice. Others criticized him, accusing him of letting emotions cloud his judgment. Social media became a battleground of opinions, with hashtags trending worldwide. At first, the European conglomerate tried to downplay the situation. Their PR team issued a vague statement saying they were disappointed, the deal hadn't worked out, and hinted at unspecified misunderstandings. But the public wasn't buying it. Anonymous sources within the company leaked details about the lunchtime incident, confirming the mocking comments about the black card. Once those reports hit the news, there was no turning back. Employees at the conglomerate panicked. Stock prices plummeted as investors lost confidence in the company's leadership. Clients began pulling contracts, worried about associating with a brand embroiled in controversy. Internally, chaos erupted. Executives scrambled to contain the damage, holding emergency meetings late into the night. Fingers were pointed, blame was assigned, and tempers flared. It quickly became clear that this wasn't just a PR nightmare, it was an existential crisis. Meanwhile, back at his own company, the reaction couldn't have been more different. When word spread about why the deal had been canceled, employees erupted in applause. They gathered in the office cafeteria, cheering and chanting his name. To them, he wasn't just their boss. He was a hero, someone who refused to compromise his values, even when billions were on the line. His decision inspired loyalty and pride, not just among his immediate team, but across the entire organization. That afternoon, he addressed his staff during an impromptu meeting. Standing in front of a packed conference room, he spoke candidly about what had happened. "I know we lost a big opportunity today," he admitted, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "But I also believe that standing up for yourself isn't just good for the soul, it's good for business. We can't build a future based on fear or disrespect. Our company deserves better than that." His words resonated deeply. Employees nodded along, some even wiping away tears. For many of them, this wasn't just about one man making a tough call. It was about seeing someone in power take a stand against injustice. It reminded them why they chose to work for him in the first place, because he led with integrity, empathy, and courage. As the days passed, the fallout continued to unfold. The CEO of the European conglomerate issued a public apology, promising to address the toxic culture within the company. "We are committed to fostering an inclusive environment where everyone feels respected and valued," he said in a televised statement. He announced plans to implement diversity training programs, overhaul hiring practices, and create new policies aimed at preventing discrimination. But apologies weren't enough to repair the damage. Several high-profile clients severed ties with the conglomerate, citing concerns about its leadership and workplace culture. Employees staged protests outside headquarters, demanding accountability and transparency. Behind closed doors, board members debated whether the current CEO should step down. The once mighty corporation found itself teetering on the brink of collapse. On the other side of the equation, things were looking very different. Despite losing the $5.5 billion deal, his company emerged stronger than ever. Investors admired his principled stance, pouring additional funding into the business. Competitors reached out, eager to partner with a leader who prioritized ethics over profit. New opportunities began cropping up, each one more promising than the last. Perhaps, most importantly, his decision sparked a global conversation about racism in the workplace. People shared their own stories of discrimination, using social media platforms to amplify voices that had long been silenced. Activists praised him for shining a spotlight on systemic issues that often went unaddressed. Even rival CEOs weighed in, acknowledging the need for greater accountability and inclusivity in corporate settings. A few weeks later, he held a press conference to address the situation publicly. Dressed in a sharp suit, he walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. Cameras flashed as reporters leaned forward, pens poised to capture every word. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured but firm. "This wasn't about revenge or ego," he said, his gaze steady as he looked out at the crowd. "It was about sending a message. Disrespect has no place in business or anywhere else. As leaders, we have a responsibility to set the standard for how people are treated. If we don't, who will?" The audience erupted in cheers, but he wasn't finished yet. "Yes, walking away from that deal hurt financially," he continued. "But staying silent would have hurt far worse. This is bigger than me or my company. It's about creating a world where everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background, can succeed without having to fight for basic respect." When the press conference ended, journalists rushed to file their stories. Analysts dissected his remarks, praising his eloquence and resolve. Social media lit up again, this time with messages of support flooding in from all corners of the globe. Strangers sent heartfelt notes thanking him for inspiring them to speak out against discrimination. Parents told him they were sharing his story with their children, hoping to teach them the importance of standing up for what's right. Back home, he reflected on everything that had happened. The whirlwind of attention had died down slightly, giving him time to process the events of the past few weeks. He felt proud of what he'd done, not because it made him look good, but because it had sparked meaningful change. Still, he knew the fight wasn't over. Racism wasn't something you could eradicate overnight. It required constant effort, vigilance, and courage. One evening, as he sat alone in his study, he opened his laptop and began drafting a plan. He envisioned a foundation dedicated to mentoring young entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. He wanted to provide them with resources, guidance, and connections to help them navigate industries that often shut them out. He also dreamed of partnering with other minority-led businesses to form a coalition focused on advocating for fairness and inclusion in the workplace. As he typed, a small smile crept onto his face. Walking away from that deal might have cost him billions, but it had given him something far more valuable: purpose. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be, not just as a businessman, but as a human being, and deep down he knew this was only the beginning. The weeks following the canceled deal were a whirlwind of activity, both for him and for the world watching. What started as a single decision, a bold stand against disrespect, had snowballed into something much bigger. People weren't just talking about the $5.5 billion that vanished overnight. They were discussing what it meant to lead with integrity in a world often driven by profit. His actions had struck a chord, sparking conversations in boardrooms, classrooms, and living rooms around the globe. At first, the attention was overwhelming. Reporters camped outside his office building, hoping to catch even a glimpse of him leaving or arriving. Social media buzzed with hashtags like "Stand for Respect" and "No More Silence," turning his story into a movement. Strangers stopped him on the street to shake his hand or thank him for standing up when so many others might have stayed quiet. Some told him his courage gave them strength to confront their own battles with discrimination. Others said his example inspired them to demand better from their workplaces and communities. But despite the outpouring of support, he knew this wasn't about fame or recognition. For him, it was personal. Every late-night meeting where someone dismissed his ideas because of the color of his skin, every snide comment disguised as humor, every time he had to work twice as hard to prove himself, it all came rushing back. This wasn't just about one racist remark over lunch. It was about years of fighting an uphill battle, knowing full well that success didn't shield you from prejudice. And yet, here he was, using his platform to say, "Enough." As the dust settled, he turned his focus inward. He gathered his leadership team for a series of brainstorming sessions. Together, they mapped out ways to channel the momentum from the controversy into meaningful action. The idea for a foundation began taking shape, a space dedicated to uplifting underrepresented voices in business and tech. But it wouldn't stop there. He envisioned partnerships with schools, mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs, and initiatives aimed at breaking down barriers that kept talented individuals from reaching their full potential. One evening, after another long day of meetings, he sat down at his kitchen table with a notebook. He jotted down ideas, sketching out plans for what would eventually become the cornerstone of his post-deal journey, a coalition of minority-led businesses committed to fostering equity and inclusion across industries. The goal was simple but ambitious: to create a network where leaders could share resources, advocate for policy changes, and hold each other accountable for creating fairer workplaces. Word of these efforts spread quickly. Other CEOs reached out, eager to join forces. Some admitted they'd faced similar challenges but never felt empowered to speak up. Others confessed they hadn't realized how pervasive discrimination still was until his story made headlines. Slowly but surely, a community began forming, one built not on competition or greed, but on shared values and mutual respect. Meanwhile, the European conglomerate continued to struggle. Despite their public apology and promises of reform, trust was hard to rebuild. Employees filed lawsuits alleging systemic racism within the company. Clients pulled contracts, citing concerns about associating with a brand tainted by scandal. Shareholders demanded answers, leading to internal investigations that uncovered deeper issues than anyone had anticipated. By the end of the quarter, the conglomerate reported staggering losses, a stark reminder of the cost of complacency. But while the fallout consumed the conglomerate, his own company thrived. Investors who initially questioned his decision to walk away from the deal now praised his foresight. Competitors approached him with fresh offers, eager to collaborate with a leader who prioritized ethics over profit. Clients renewed contracts, expressing admiration for his unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Within months, his company's valuation soared past $15 billion, a testament to the power of principled leadership. Still, he refused to let success go to his head. Instead, he used his growing influence to amplify voices that often went unheard. He gave keynote speeches at conferences, sharing stories of resilience and urging audiences to challenge the status quo. He wrote op-eds calling for systemic change, laying bare the realities of racism in corporate America, and he ensured his foundation remained grounded in its mission, focusing on tangible impact rather than empty gestures. One particularly memorable moment came during a panel discussion at a major tech summit. Moderators asked him how he managed to stay calm in the face of adversity. He leaned forward, his expression thoughtful but resolute. "It's not easy," he admitted. "There are days when the weight of everything feels unbearable. But I remind myself why I do this, not for me, but for the next generation. If I can make even a small difference, then it's worth it." The audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet. Later, attendees lined up to speak with him, sharing their own experiences and thanking him for paving the way. It was moments like these that reminded him why he kept pushing forward, even when the odds seemed stacked against him. Back home, he found solace in the little things. Late-night walks through his neighborhood, coffee with old friends, quiet mornings, spent reading books about history and leadership. These moments grounded him, reminding him that no matter how big his achievements became, he was still human, still flawed, still learning. As the year drew to a close, awards began rolling in. Industry publications named him Entrepreneur of the Year. Community organizations honored him for his contributions to diversity and inclusion. At one ceremony, as he accepted yet another trophy, he took a moment to reflect on everything that had brought him to this point. "This isn't my victory," he told the crowd, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It belongs to everyone who has ever been told they don't belong, to everyone who has fought for a seat at the table, to everyone who believes in a better, fairer future. Let's keep going, for ourselves, for our children, and for generations to come." The room erupted in cheers, but he barely noticed. In that moment, surrounded by people who shared his vision, he felt a deep sense of peace. Walking away from that $5.5 billion deal might have cost him financially, but it had given him something far more valuable: purpose. And as he stepped off the stage, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The months that followed were transformative, not just for him but for the entire landscape of business and technology. His decision to walk away from the $5.5 billion deal had set off a chain reaction, sparking conversations about racism, respect, and accountability in ways no one could have predicted. What started as a personal stand against prejudice evolved into a movement that touched lives far beyond the boardroom. As his foundation gained traction, it became a beacon of hope for countless individuals who had long felt marginalized or overlooked. Young entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities flocked to its programs, eager to learn from someone who understood their struggles firsthand. Workshops filled up within hours of being announced. Mentorship sessions stretched late into the night, with participants reluctant to leave until every question was answered. For many of these aspiring leaders, this wasn't just an opportunity, it was validation, proof that they mattered, that their dreams were worth pursuing no matter how daunting the obstacles might seem. One evening during a mentorship event at a local community center, he met a young woman who stood out among the crowd. She was soft-spoken but determined, her eyes lighting up as she described her vision for a tech startup aimed at bridging the digital divide in underserved neighborhoods. Her passion reminded him of himself, of those early days when he was fighting to prove that he belonged. After the session ended, she approached him hesitantly, thanking him for taking the time to listen. "You've shown us that we don't have to compromise who we are to succeed," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. He smiled warmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. No, you don't, he replied. And if I can help even one person believe that, then everything I've done is worth it. Word of the foundation's success spread quickly, drawing attention from unexpected corners. Major corporations began reaching out, asking how they could contribute. Some donated funds, others offered resources like office space, training programs, or access to networks. A few even admitted they'd been inspired to reevaluate their own hiring practices and workplace cultures. It wasn't perfect, change never happened overnight, but it was progress. And for him, progress was enough. Meanwhile, his coalition of minority-led businesses continued to grow. What had started as a small group of like-minded CEOs expanded into a powerful network spanning multiple industries. Together, they advocated for policies that promoted fairness and inclusion, pushing back against discriminatory practices wherever they found them. They also collaborated on projects, pooling their expertise and resources to tackle challenges none of them could face alone. One particularly impactful initiative focused on creating pipelines for diverse talent, ensuring that companies couldn't claim ignorance when it came to finding qualified candidates from underrepresented backgrounds. Public perception shifted, too. Consumers grew more vocal about supporting brands that aligned with their values. Social media campaigns encouraged people to boycott companies with poor track records on diversity and inclusion. Investors began prioritizing ethical leadership, steering capital toward businesses that demonstrated genuine commitment to change. Slowly but surely, the tide was turning, and he knew his actions had played a role in that shift. But despite the accolades and achievements, he remained grounded. Success hadn't changed him. If anything, it deepened his resolve. He still woke up early each morning, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. He still listened intently to feedback, knowing that growth required humility, and he still made time for the little things, the moments that kept him connected to what truly mattered. One crisp autumn afternoon, he found himself standing on stage at a global leadership summit. Thousands of attendees packed the auditorium, hanging on to his every word as he delivered the keynote address. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment for posterity. But instead of focusing on his accomplishments, he chose to highlight the journey, the lessons learned, the battles fought, and the victories yet to come. I didn't walk away from that deal because I wanted to make headlines, he told the audience, his tone measured but heartfelt. I did it because I believed in myself, in my company, and in the idea that we can build a better world. A world where everyone has a fair shot at success, where respect isn't negotiable, where your value isn't determined by the color of your skin or the size of your bank account, but by the impact you have on the people around you. The room erupted in applause, but he held up a hand, signaling for quiet. This fight isn't over, he continued. Racism doesn't disappear overnight. Injustice doesn't vanish because we wish it would. It takes work, hard work, painful work. But it's necessary. Because the alternative, a world where we accept inequality as normal, is unacceptable. When he finished speaking, the audience rose to their feet, cheering and clapping for several minutes. Later, as he mingled with attendees during the networking session, countless individuals approached him to express gratitude. Some shared stories of overcoming adversity. Others vowed to follow in his footsteps, promising to use their platforms for good. Each interaction reinforced his belief that change was possible, that together they could create a future defined not by division, but by unity. Back home, life returned to its familiar rhythm. Days were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and brainstorming new ideas. Nights were reserved for reflection, often spent journaling or reading books about history and social justice. He found comfort in routine, knowing that consistency was key to sustaining momentum. Yet even amidst the busyness, he never lost sight of why he did what he did. Every decision, every project, every partnership stemmed from a single goal: to leave the world better than he found it. One winter evening, as snow gently fell outside his window, he sat down with a cup of tea and reflected on the past year. So much had changed since that fateful lunch meeting. The canceled deal had cost him billions, but it had given him something far more valuable: purpose. perspective, a renewed sense of mission. More importantly, it had reminded him of the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. He picked up a pen and scribbled a note to himself. Progress isn't linear. There will be setbacks, challenges, moments when it feels like the weight of the world is crushing you. But keep going, keep believing, keep fighting. As he placed the pen back on the table, a sense of peace washed over him. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Racism, discrimination, and inequality were deeply entrenched issues that wouldn't disappear anytime soon. But he also knew that change was possible. One courageous act, one honest conversation, one supportive gesture at a time. And so, with renewed determination, he prepared to face whatever came next. Not for fame, fortune, or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. Because somewhere out there, a young girl dreaming of becoming an engineer needed to know she could succeed. Because a struggling entrepreneur trying to break into the industry deserved a fair chance. Because a world built on respect and equality was worth fighting for. This wasn't just his story anymore. It belonged to everyone who dared to dream of a brighter future. And as he turned off the light and headed to bed, he allowed himself a small smile. The battle was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. Hopeful that maybe, just maybe, the world was finally ready to listen.